What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast, your the podcast covering the Pittsburgh Panthers. And today, have a very special guest on with me, Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network, the draft analyst over there. I've had him on a few times here, mainly to talk Kenny Pickett. We won't talk much Kenny today, but we will talk other Pitt guys. But first of all, Ian, how are you doing, my guy?
I'm doing good, man. It's been too long since I've talked about Pittsburgh prospects, so we got to change that for sure. I'm a little bummed that we're not talking about Kenny today, but I'll let that slide. We got a lot of a good stuff on tap, and obviously, through April, been watching a lot of these guys. Obviously, it's a busy time, right? But leading up to the draft, that's all you can do is prepare for it and make sure you know your stuff going in. So it's been a fun process, and especially diving into the Pitt class because even the surface guys like Kenny and Damarri, who we'll talk about, they got a few other talented guys to watch as well. So it's a fun class.
For sure, a fun class for Pitt. And as you said, right, a few guys that they will have. But first, I think the other guy that, other than Kenny Pickett in this class, that was once thought to be maybe a seventh round pick, sixth round pick, has really shot up the boards as Damarri Mathis. I can't say that he has done anything to hurt his stock every step of the way. And this has kind of been the one thing with me about Damarri Mathis is that it felt like every single time he went somewhere, Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Day, the stock kept going like this. I mean, really, I mean, the fourth sub 4.4 at the Combine was big. I thought he had a good week at Mobile. And then the guy jumps 43 and a half inches on the vertical at Pitt Pro Day right in front of me. I was absurdly shocked how high he got up. But I mean, man, I guess the first thing is, Damarri, what about the tape? Right? That's kind of the only thing that I haven't talked about a ton here. What do you think of Damarri Mathis's tape?
Yeah, so first off, gotta talk about the offseason real quick because you're absolutely right. I mean, he's gone on a straight upward trajectory, almost 90 degrees, man. I mean, it's crazy how quickly he's ascended, and I knew he had a solid Senior Bowl week. That was like, all right, he's kind of on my radar. And I remember talking with you about him. I hadn't done a deep dive on him at that point, but I had managed to catch some of his tape. And I think what I said was, pretty good press technique, closes well, sinks his hips on direction changes, and is a physical guy. I was just a little uncertain about the athletic ceiling, but he has really, quelled those concerns this offseason. The NFL Combine running a sub 4.4 was really impressive. And then, as you said, the 43.5-inch vertical is just insane. And I think, watching him, did my deep dive on him after that, because at that point, we were kind of getting to the end of the scouting report, buzz, but I was like, all right, this guy's testing so well. I know he has pretty good tape. Let me go in and do a deep dive and really get the layout of this guy. And so I went and did the scouting report on him. And I was I was impressed. I had a feeling that I'd be impressed because I hadn't done a deep dive yet, but I was more impressed than I thought I would be. And obviously, you never want to come into an evaluation with expectations, right? But I guess what I should say is that he was making plays out there. Like I was like, this is a guy who needs to get more, who needs to have more hype than he has now, just being an athletic guy who tests well. He's a player who plays well on the football field, right? So I think it all boils down to, he has the traits, but he supplements them really well. If I can pull up my notes, what I do for my scouting reports is I do bulleted lists and then I can kind of consolidate it into written form, right? But some of my bolded notes were, phenomenal proportional length with those 32-inch arms, right? Has elite closing speed with that explosiveness. But I really like how he sinks his hips on those direction changes, uses feet first and press. And here's the thing, I don't think his press technique is perfect. And we can get into that. I think he's a little uncontrolled at times. He gets worked a little too far up the field with those route stems, right? Those releases that can get him off balance pretty easily. So I'd like him to play a little tighter on those. But I do appreciate that he uses feet first. He's a very physical dude, but he's not often overzealous with that physicality. Very, more often than not, I was really impressed with the sense of timing that he had. Using his feet to match the receiver and then jam at the proper time, channeling that physicality appropriately because he's a very physical dude. I mean, he is a chippy competitor. He's gonna get you in your face, and I love that about him. I love corners that have the alpha mentality. But then on top of that, he's shown that he has the awareness to use it at the right time. So that was a really encouraging thing for me. Beyond that, having the speed to carry guys upfield, he definitely has that. He's got the playmaking ability at the catch point. We've seen that he was very productive in 2019. And obviously missed 2020 with an injury, but came back in 2021 and kept it going. And I think that you see that on tape is that it kind of matches the production where he has a very good sense of timing at the catch point as well, can elevate with that 43.5-inch vert, can time himself well, and can obviously use his length to make plays on the ball as well. So really proactive physical playmaker who I think has the explosiveness and enough fluidity, not an elite fluid corner, in terms of, he has the elite burst, not quite elite with his fluidity, but I think he's fluid enough where he can transition, he can stack direction changes, very twitchy, energetic mover. I always like those guys at the cornerback position. So overall, he checks a lot of my boxes. I think the two knocks that I would have, is playing more controlled, occasional lapses in zone coverage with awareness, right? But again, it's nothing that you can't coach up. I think more often than not, he has the traits that you can coach up, and he's got the explosiveness, the length, the closing speed, the fluidity, the physicality. A lot of the traits that I want for my corners that aren't necessarily developmental, that are kind of more innate. He has all those. So I was a big fan. I like the upside even more now, and I think that there's a lot of promising stuff on the tape.
Yeah, I've always thought that when you look at Damarri Mathis, I never, I don't want to say he's a bad athlete on tape because he's
I
not.
never quite saw it. Like I saw a
Yeah,
very good, like great, like the 43.5-inch vert that's a generational number, right?
yeah, I
I
never.
saw a very good closing speed, but not quite that. But I mean, hey, I'll
Exactly.
take it.
And, like, I didn't see 4.38 speed either. I saw, like, okay, 4.5 ish, but he, like, outperformed my expectations in athletic terms. I never thought his game, and this is probably good for him, to be quite honest with you. I think this is actually a good thing. Yeah, he doesn't have, I necessarily think the uber athletic traits on film, but I thought his game was predicated on, football IQ, kind of read reacting stuff, and I thought it was predicated on his physicality, and I thought that's kind of what his game was predicated on. So when he tested it, it was just kind of a bonus to me. Because again, I never thought his game was predicated on that, but maybe there's some untapped potential there with
Yeah,
Damarri Mathis, and I find him to be a really fascinating player as a result of that because he comes from a scheme that he literally played cover zero and quarters pretty much the whole time. I mean, he was on an island almost every snap he put out there. Now, the game against Wake Forest, I think, kind of attributed some of the things you're talking about when he faced a guy like A.T. Perry, who's this really big guy, but he's very fluid for his size, and he had those quick stop routes. I don't think Damarri could stick and reroute with him as best. So he's a little bit, I think, late sometimes to see it with his eyes, get a little bit too much in his pocket, and he'll have some help on that outside, and he'll play more leverage rules, and he'll do these different things. You're not going to play a lot of cover zero quarters in the NFL. So he has the hardest stuff down, but I also do find that when you look at what he brings to the table, I think that there are some of those fluidity concerns, as you said. And I think that might limit his ceiling less than what the athletic traits or the testing would say. He kind of is going to be, I think, a corner two to me. That's the kind of type of guy I'm seeing. And so that kind of now lends myself into my next question for you is, well, okay, Damarri now has these traits, has this tape. How do you actually evaluate that, and where does he go in this corner group? Because this is a group of corners that has some really good players. That obviously the top with Stingley, Booth, Gardner, McDuffie, those guys named McCreary, Elam, Gordon. You have Tariq Woolen coming up. You have Cam Taylor Britt coming up. You have, and it's just a deep class. I mean, you have Kobe Bryant, Jalen Amore Davis, Martin Emerson, Marcus Jones, Mario Goodrich. Like there are so many guys in this class, and then you have to slot Damarri Mathis in here somewhere. Where do you project him to go? Where's he on your list specifically? What corner number, if you have that, or what round grade did you give him? So where are you looking at Damarri Mathis to go?
yeah. So I think it's tough, like you said. It's a very deep corner class. I mean, there's a ton of top corners in at the top, and then the depth too. Like in the day two range, there's like almost a dozen, or maybe over the dozen in that range, where you're thinking, this guy might go here. Like even combine standouts like Zion McCollum, right? I mean, that guy blew the combine out of the water. So it's like there's so much depth. It's tough to figure out where it's gonna, piece together, how it's gonna piece together, where guys are gonna go. I do think with Damarri, the thing that he has going for him is you mentioned it, having that man coverage experience. That was such a big part of his game at Pittsburgh, being on that island all the time. And he proved that he could hold up there. There were some lapses, as we've said, but, at least having that closing speed, that explosiveness and recovery ability with that ability to gear up quickly out of transitions, even if he's not the most fluid. I was encouraged by his NFL combine, not just with testing, is that he looked really fluid in the space. So it could be just a matter of getting a little lower in your stance. I think he does a good job of it already, but being a little more efficient with that footwork, being a little tighter, maybe that could help him. So we'll see if he can improve there. But I think a lot of the traits are there, especially if you're a team that runs more man than zone. Now in today's NFL, you have to be able to do either one. You have to play situational football. So like I never subscribe to the idea where you're being drafted to just play one, right? You have to be able to play both. But I do think that he, has traits that translate well in zone too. That explosiveness being one of them. The ability to close quickly. It's all there. So I think with him using that projection, I could see day two, somewhere in day two, being his landing spot. Obviously, with the 43.5-inch vert, we know some teams have specific athletic thresholds for what they're looking for. And I just know that he'd be at the top for a lot of those, with that sub 4 speed and that 43.5-inch vert. Obviously, it doesn't show up quite that much on tape, but that's a high bar to clear. I still think he has very good explosiveness on tape. So it's not, you're splitting hairs at that point, right? So I think there's a lot there, and the physical edge too. That's something, especially if you're an old school evaluator, you might look at that and say, I want that on my team, because it's a lot easier to teach a physical corner who's like, he is a little grabby sometimes when he gets a step behind, and that can hurt him, that can draw penalties, right? But it's a lot easier for a physical cornerback to teach him to be cleaner with that physicality than it is to teach a passive corner who's not overly physical to be more physical. Sometimes that toughness, that competitive toughness, is more of an innate trait for corners. So you like to see it in guys, and it's something that you can kind of refine and clean up. I think that's the case with Damarri. So if I can I'm going to look up my big board for a sec. I don't have the number right on me here, but I think he was my CB6, right? Actually, let me look it up on my computer. But he's up there. He's up there for me. I ran his numbers through my new grading scale, which admittedly is incomplete. It's not perfect, but it is a good way to quantify analysis and try and get a handle on where guys are. So I got Andrew Booth CB1, Derek Stanley CB2, Kyer Elam CB3, Ahmad Gardner CB4. And then I have Martin Emerson, Kyler Gordon. I think Damarri Mathis is CB7. No, he's CB8. Yeah, because Jalen Armour Davis. He's in the top 10 though. That's around my top 8. He's in there. He's up there. He's in that day 2 range, that kind of mid day 2 range for me. I would take him late round 2 personally, because I think a lot of the traits are there. But I think more likely is that he goes round 3, maybe early round 4. But definitely up from what we were, assuming earlier in the cycle, like mid day 3, right?
Yeah, so certainly, I think that certainly have thoughts on that. But first, folks, let me let you guys know about Built Bar, because Built Bar is the protein bar that has all the taste that you guys would ever want. Built Bar has the first ever protein infused marshmallow with the Built Bar Puffs, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all other Built Bars. So you can replace your candy bars with these healthy Built Bars, because you get all the health benefits of a protein bar while getting the deliciousness of a usual candy bar. And here's all you have to look at: low calories, low sugar, low in net carbs, high in protein. It's all there for you. So here's all you have to do. Go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and get 50% off your first order from built.com. Go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your first order from built.com. And folks, as always, I do want to talk about what Ian just said. Obviously, just had that ad interruption, but you said CB8, round 3, round 4. So that's interesting to me, because I when I look at what I guess Damarri brings to the table, I see a lot of good things. I do kind of wonder though if some of the stuff that we had talked about, I think usually he would be a round 3 lock, but it's such a deep class, and you have guys there that are so much fun. You even have, Tariq Woolen, you have Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State. You have all these guys that are in this kind of mold where you got to wonder if some of these guys are going to get pushed down the board a little bit just because of that. And again, I think that round 3 grade is very valid. I think what you are talking about with him makes complete sense. I would imagine, and I think you're kind of right in that area. Day or late day 2, early day 3, right? Very early day 3. In that early part of that 4th round, I could see him fitting in there. I could see him going in round 3. I remember at Pitt Pro, specifically the Bengals DB coach was there. Round 3 there makes sense to me. I think there's a lot of good fits for him there in that back end of that 3rd round too. Like when you look at who's actually picking in that area, I think a lot of it actually makes sense. And here's kind of what I will say about that back end of the 3rd round. You have, as I said, Cincinnati. You have some teams like San Francisco that could use some help. Detroit could always use a little bit more help. You have Baltimore that could maybe draft in their corner. They always love to draft those guys. I mean, there are a ton of teams in that back end of the 3rd round where I
I think
think he fits
the
in well.
Patriots too, who run a lot of man as well. So
Yeah. I mean, you can name as many of them. I mean, I mean, 84 to the Steelers. I mean, that's possible as well. So I think that is possible if you're thinking about him staying in Pittsburgh. That is a possibility. So I like that. Now let's just talk one more thing about Damarri. We talked about his game. We talked about where he might go. What about his fits? What's your favorite fits for Damarri Mathis and what he does?
Well, I think the Bengals are definitely one to bring them up. They obviously got a up close look at him at the pro day, running through those drills and seeing him jump 43.5 inches in person. That would, admittedly, that would latch in my mind a little bit like, oh, this guy's got hops, right? So I'd love that. But I do think, the Patriots, as I mentioned, they run a lot of man, and it's one of those things where, as I mentioned, you have to be able to play both in the NFL. But some schemes at the same time, and again, most schemes, like usually the highest disparity you're going to find is like 60-40, because again, you have to be situational. But some schemes, some teams really like guys that can play one or the other, right? And I think that Damarri Mathis, with that man capability, in Belichick's scheme, they really pride themselves in having that. I think that having that for him, especially, playing on an island all the time at Pitt and holding his own and showing that he has the physicality and the athleticism to do that, is a very good fit for him. You mentioned the 49ers. I love that one as well. Again, I think that he has a lot of the traits that they look for on the edge, and the length especially is good for me because he's around 5'11", right? But having 32-inch arms, that's above average length and really good proportional length for him. So that kind of gives him a higher disruption radius, which helps him to make plays on the ball, helps him jam. Gets that extra leverage in there. So I really like that for him. I think that provides him some flexibility there. If I can look up my latest mock draft that I had, I think I had him going to one of these teams, but I'm curious to see which team it was. I mean, with Damarri and with any corner in this class, it's one of those things where, there's so many different permutations that you can make, right? I think with Damarri, though, the good thing is that he's not one of those taller corners who might have zone scheme limitations where they have to go into a zone predominant scheme, right? I think he's one of those guys who, while his fluidity is not elite, is good enough, to kind of withstand against those NFL athletes. So that's a good thing that's working for him in the physicality, as I mentioned. Let me see if I can find the pick here. I'm clicking on the mock now. I think I had him going round 3 or something. We'll see. I'm going to search him right quick. But all right, here we go. Mathis went to the Dallas Cowboys in this one. So the Cowboys getting some corner help as well. I think that's one where they're more of a, with Dan Quinn, they got a lot of cover 3 in there. So again, but I do think he has the explosiveness, the length to translate there as well. So it's one of those things. He's not going to be confined with his skill set. He can go to a number of different places. Teams that really like man are going to especially like him because of that man ability and that experience and that scheme. But at the same time, with the explosiveness, the length, the tenacity, and the ability to react and close quickly, it's all there on tape, the capacity to do it. There's some minor inconsistencies there, but it does give him some flexibility. So I like that. I think the one thing that might push him down as well is missing 2020 to an injury, right? But he showed he could rebound and recover and play really good football, and then obviously tested well. There's no athletic concerns about whether or not, he's got the same athleticism or, the longevity. Nothing came out of that at the NFL Combine. So there's really no red flags to me that would push him down there from the injury sense. I think you're just looking at, like you said, the depth of the corner class and how far it pushes him down. But after he tested, after he showed out at the Senior Bowl in the NFL Combine, I would confine him to, if not round 3, early round 4, but somewhere in that, 64 to 110 range, 120 range is probably where he goes.
Yeah, and I would perfectly agree with that because if you're standing out in any specific loaded class, you have to have a signature like thing that sticks out about you. Like for example, Derek Stingley stands out because of his great freshman tape, right? Like that is a signature thing. Obviously, he has other traits, but the pedigree he has and the tape he had is legit. Andrew Booth, what stands out about him? Phenomenal leaping ability. Like that is something that he has. That just I mean he so Damarri has the signature thing, which is like, holy crap, he's explosive as heck, and he has this unique scheme he came from. So he has things that stick out to you. And I'm not sure all those mid round corners, they might be good, but I'm not sure you have the same type of ability of like, okay, this is what he has. And I think that's going to be very important for Damarri Mathis moving forward. And I like a lot of the fits that you named there. I think he's going to fit in a lot of different places. And a lot of these Pitt DBs, Hamlin, Jackson, Pinnock, they've gone to the NFL. Vontae Maddox, they've gone to the NFL from the Narduzzi scheme, and they've ended up being longevity. The longevity of these Pitt guys has been pretty impressive, even if they're late round guys. But Damarri Mathis is going to be probably the highest drafted of any of them. But I do want to talk about some other Pitt guys that we haven't talked about yet. But first, let me let you guys know about BetOnline.net, because BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sport betting needs and information. Find all the latest sports development league reviews and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And now, Ian, I did want to transition from Damarri Mathis to someone who I again tested really well at Pitt Pro Day, and I thought had a chance now, really, who was someone that I don't think was talked about at all. I've seen his name pop up a little bit more now in league circles. John Patrician, the linebacker from Pitt, former converted safety, came from Penn State. He walked on to Pitt, earned a scholarship, and not only did he do that, he earned playing time, ended up being a big time contributor for this team. And what are your kind of thoughts on John Patrician? Is he going to get drafted? How do you see him in the NFL? What do you like about John Patrician?
Yeah, so I was his testing numbers obviously caught my eye. I mean, I think the official ones came in a little bit lower than the initial ones, but still 4.68 40-yard dash, which is really good for a linebacker. I mean, like, it's not elite, right? But if you're a linebacker, you're playing at the second level. Rarely are you traversing the whole field. I'd prefer if you had that short range explosiveness, which he showed. He had that 35.5-inch vert, that 10-foot broad, and a 702 3-cone is very good as well. And then 20 bench reps, showing he's got that upper body strength at around 6'1", 227. So the size, the explosiveness is there for him. I wanted to see if it translated on the tape. It's always what you want to do, especially, with Damarri Mathis after that 43.5-inch vertical. Does it translate on tape? You ask that question for everyone. And with Patrician, I was impressed. I thought it did. I do think he closes ground quickly in that middle range. He was playing a lot of outside backer, a lot of will, in coverage, especially dropping back, sometimes that overhang slot, which I was impressed with. I think he showed fluidity in space, which was really good. Sometimes guys have that, straight line explosiveness, but are a little stiff in the hips and can't always redirect their momentum. And I thought Patrician showed a good job of that. I think he did that in coverage. There were times when he'd flip his hips and run with guys, and that was really impressive. And then also showing some spatial awareness to kind of hold his ground and follow the QB's eyes. A lot of good stuff that I like to see. When he came downhill, there were a few missed tackles. And I think that, he can wrap up a little bit better, can take better angles sometimes. There were some times when he gets into congestion and hesitated a little bit. Might be that former safety where you're not as comfortable working congestion as a guy who's been playing linebacker his entire career. So stuff that you got to clean up there if you're going to play in the box. But I was impressed with the coverage utility. I really was. I think running a 4.68, it's a good time, not an elite time. That might push him down a little bit. Again, it's not like a liability time, but it's something that might not, supersede other linebackers with that time. So I could see him, if he doesn't get drafted in like round 7 or 6, as an undrafted free agent, he'd be one of the first calls that I would make, just getting that coverage ability and that explosiveness in my camp. And from everything I've heard too, a great character, a great guy to have in that locker room at the very least, right? So I think there was enough on tape for me to say, I'm circling this guy, giving him a call. If I don't get him with an extra 7th rounder, get him in my camp and see what he can do. Because I think as a will, I think he's got that ability and coverage, that fluidity, along with his explosiveness, to be a solid player, maybe match up against some tight ends. So I was a pretty big fan relative to the hype. And, I think we could see him sneak in along with Phil Campbell. I didn't get to watch as much as him, but he ran a 4.63, and I think he showed that speed in some flashes that I watched on tape. So those are two guys that have the natural talent, and that's something that teams always like to bank on.
Yeah, for sure. And again, Patrician tested well. He essentially was the nickel defender, because Pitt doesn't run a nickel package, at least didn't last year. So you're talking about a big linebacker here who was essentially a nickel defender. Did a pretty good job at it, I thought. I think at the very least, he's going to be a really quality special teamer at the next level, which is always something to look for and be commended for. So I like what John Patrician brings to the table. I'm not sure he's going to get drafted, but someone that could get drafted is Lucas Krull, tight end here, who I thought had a really good day for his size. I thought he did a really nice job overall. And I thought, his tape was iffy with some of the drops, but I thought he was a pretty interesting player. I think there's places for him. And I think in this tight end group, with his athleticism kind of late in that class, he kind of sticks out as an option there. That could be an athletic type of guy. Could see him sneaking in round 7. What do you think of Lucas Krull?
Yeah, I like him, and he was obviously he was on Feldman's freaks list before the season. So the athleticism is definitely well advertised, and it shows up on tape. I think his testing numbers were around 6'6", 253. He's got 33 and 5/8 arms, so I love that length as well. Running a 4.64, 35-inch vert, 10-inch broad, or 10-foot broad, I should say. It's one of those things where very athletic guy, and it shows up again that smooth athleticism in space, especially up the seam. I think he's an easy accelerator, really good at kind of sifting into those open zones and getting open that way. But I was impressed with his ability to kind of cut stems as well. There's some in breaking routes where he's really efficient with his footwork and can accelerate quickly out of those breaks. I love to see that. Again, I think the main issue is what you mentioned. For a guy as big as he is, and as energetic and kind of tenacious as he is, you see him really celebrating on the sideline. He's a high motor guy. He has that high octane energy to him. I love to see in a tight end. But at the same time, there's a lot of drops, and not just I think the hand technique can improve, but at the same time as well can really struggle to work through contact sometimes. Like he'll get his hands on the ball, but then some guys have that hand strength where you just can't rip it away. And Krull is not in that category yet. There's times where he gets the hands on it, but a DB can come in late and wedge it out, and then right there, you're really close to a catch, and that deflated momentum can really hurt offenses. So I'd like to see him improve that hand technique and the hand strength, especially amidst contact. There's times too where he just has trouble tracking the ball, but I do like the size, the athleticism. It's all there for him, and he has flashed a lot in the instincts department. So if I'm a team, I would definitely consider taking him. Probably round 6 or 7 is where it starts, right? But he has the physical traits to bank on. If he can become a better catcher of the football and kind of hone his traits more, there's a lot of upside there. So especially getting him in a rotation as a second or third tight end, I'd be on board with that.
Yeah, and so I find him to be interesting just because of the type of skill set he has. I don't think there's a lot of guys that late in the draft that have
Yeah.
his athleticism or upside. So if you're looking for like a tight end 2, tight end 3 that can be athletic and give you some of that production, I think he's interesting. Could split out at that Y spot, F spot, whatever you want. I think he can do that. So I think he's interesting in that regard. And then there's one more guy I think that kind of sticks out to me as a guy that could be drafted. He got invited to the NFLPA Bowl. Taysir Mack is interesting to me because he was essentially having his best season of his career, then broke his collarbone and was out for the rest of the season, which sucked because he and Kenny Pickett were feeling each other. He was having a really good year in terms of his explosive plays. And then he comes out. I think he had a pretty good testing day. Wasn't eye opening. He didn't run like a 4.3, 4.2, but he ran sub 4.5. He did pretty good overall, and I thought he looked good. So Taysir Mack, what do you think? I know in the latest mock you had him being drafted. So that was interesting to me and a notable thing. You think he's going to get drafted?
I think he could. Again, it's a very deep wide receiver class, but there's a point where it drops off in like that round 6 range, right? Like there's guys that are going to get drafted, and then it kind of dips a little bit. Like there's guys that are kind of wild cards. You don't really know where to expect. And I think in that range, in that round 6, round 7 range, you could see a number of different variations for who gets drafted and who gets left out. It's going to be up to, I think cosmetic factors will have something to do with it. Maybe injury history, age, stuff like that. It's things that teams can be sticklers about. Sometimes they'll invest in guys that you don't really expect because of that. So Taysir, that might hurt him a little bit, but I do like the big playability on tape. I think the explosiveness definitely checks out. You look at I think he had a 36-inch vert and a 122 broad, 4.55. Again, not blazing speed, right, but enough speed to get upfield at least and stretch space a little bit. And then 6'2", 200 with 32-inch arms around there. That's pretty good size, right? That's size that you have. It's enough to compete in contested situations. And I think that's one of his better traits is, rising vertically, tracking the football and bringing those catches in. Very good at making the life a little bit easier for the quarterback with that catching ability and that instincts in the air. So I look at that and I think he can at least create at the catch point. I go through a process, 3-step, a 3-level threat. Can you create before the catch? Can you create at the catch point? And can you create after the catch? And I think Taysir, where he wins, even though he's not an overwhelming size threat, is that vertical threat where he can rise and reach the ball, has a good sense of timing, really good hands. And I think that alone is pretty good utility that not all wide receivers have. You'd think catching would be, kind of, the deal for them. But some guys have struggles with drops. I didn't see that a ton on Taysir's tape. I think more often than not, pretty good, pretty instinctive at the catch point. I think that combined with his ability to get downfield quickly and rise up in the air and kind of time those leaps, pretty good. So I think you can make a career off of that. I'm not sure if he'll be drafted, but that's a skill set too that, even if you're not an elite separator, you can win in camp that way. That's a good way in one-on-ones if you have that ability to win in contested situations. If you have that instinctive ability, that can help you make a roster or a practice squad and kind of stick around in the league. So I can see that being a path for him.
Yeah, and again, that is something that I find to be pretty interesting with him. Contested catch guy this year, I think got a little sharper in his route running and was able to create a lot more separation, which I thought was good to see. But again, the injuries kind of just jolted that entire momentum to a stop. But I think he's a guy that could potentially get drafted. Now, Ian, before I let you go here, I want to ask you two things. First, Calijah Adomitis. Is he going to be the first long snapper drafted? Second, 2023 guys. I know there's Jordan Addison, but who are you looking at?
Yeah, so Adomitis, I'm on a Pitt podcast, so I'm obligated to say yes. No, but I do think the Senior Bowl, right? You look at the guys from last year. I think Thomas Fletcher and Cameron Cheeseman were at the Senior Bowl. They were the long snappers that were there. They both got drafted. Adomitis was the long snapper at the Senior Bowl. So I think if there's a team that needs a long snapper, the Senior Bowl, in recent history is where they look to first. And I think Adomitis, I think he had, I can't remember, did he do the bench press? I don't think he did. Oh no, he did. Did he do it at the combine? I forgot. I'll have to look back. I haven't been well studied on my long snapper tape, but I do know he's a high character guy as well. I know the foundation work he does off the field is great. Be a good locker room addition, and then just being at the Senior Bowl too, having that presence there, being able to kind of get one on one with teams and see them in person can be a really good thing for teams looking to get comfortable with a player's personality. Right. And I imagine they'd have no issues with Adomitis there. So I could definitely see him being one of the long snappers that's drafted late just because of that, Senior Bowl element. But moving to 2023 guys, I think, Jordan Addison's tough. I really wanted to talk about him, but I know we got to talk about other guys as well. There's only so much you can say about Addison before you just realize you're going to keep talking for hours because he's already a stud. He's such a fun player, looking at how he separates, how he wins after the catch with that run after catch ability, and then the ability to make plays on the ball as well. Kenny Pickett, I'm a big fan of his tape, but there were times where the passes kind of led Addison into trouble, and Addison still did a really good job dealing with that, with his, contested catch, the instincts, the ability to contort and haul in those passes amidst contact. I'm a big fan. I know you mentioned Greg Jennings as his comp. I think it was a couple of podcasts ago. I like that on the surface. I want to explore that once we start that 2023 cycle, but he's got talent, and he's got talent everywhere, not just a one-dimensional receiver. He's the full package. So I'm a big fan of him. I think moving around with Pitt, if I could bring up some other guys, Israel Abonacon, running back. I was really impressed with some of the plays that he made. Really good athlete. I think that's going to help him a lot if he can continue to develop as a running back with soft skills there. I think that coming out of Mumfield, the Akron transfer, he's shown some good stuff. I'm excited to see how he translates in that offense. Obviously, with Keaton Slovis being the quarterback now, and even Slovis is going to be an interesting story, right? I mean, he showed really good promise at USC as a freshman, and then kind of trickled down, battled injuries a lot. Want to see if he's fully healthy. I don't love the ceiling there. I think he has a pretty low ceiling relative to other quarterbacks, but he flashed a lot of good traits at USC, being, enough mobility to kind of escape in the pocket and buy himself time, really good accuracy, right? So if he can get into rhythm and kind of show off that stuff at Pittsburgh, I know Kirk Cousins has been a high-end comp for him. I think he can maybe reach that, but, if not that, be a really good backup in the league. So I'm a big fan of, the projection there. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, well, actually, first, one more. I know Carter Warren. He was going to be a day 2 tackle for me if he declared this year, and he didn't. I was kind of bummed by that because he's got some great tape. I thought he really hit his stride this year. Not just the athleticism and the length, but he's a mauler. I mean, he blocks to the end of the whistle. He'll drive guys into the ground, and he's got some left-right versatility too. So I thought he was going to go day 2 potentially if he declared. He didn't. But I do think he's, in that early round range, initially for the tackles next year. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, where do I start here? I mean, there's so many guys. Calijah Kancey on the interior. I mean, he's a beast. He's a wrecking ball, super compact defensive lineman who's explosive, twitchy. I love that about guys. Haba Baldonado is another one, a really high motor guy who has some interesting tools. I think he came over from Italy, right? So he's got a great story, but he's got some tools, a high motor, and he's got that length as well. He's a big guy. I'm really excited to see him kind of hit that stride this year. John Morgan is another one. I think he's a little smaller, but he did flash a little bit for me, so I'm excited to see what he does. Servassier Denis, the linebacker, very explosive dude. I think on my notes, I wanted to see him improve in coverage a little bit, so I'm looking for him to kind of take the next step there. But as a blitzer, right, he comes downhill with a ton of heat as a run defender, not afraid to surge into those gaps. And he's a fearless, heavy hitter who's got that closing speed to really make plays in the box. So I was a big fan of his tape. Looking forward to seeing him make the next step. And I know there are a few corners in the secondary that I wrote down. I'll have to kind of check my notes later on. But Pittsburgh, bottom line is they got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. And I think, a lot of guys leaving in this class, like Kenny Pickett, Damarri Mathis, Taysir Mack, a lot of guys that were kind of the glue for this team. But I don't think it stops there. I think you've got guys coming back in. I think they're going to roll it back and they're going to be competitive again. And I think it all starts with the talent up front on both sides of the ball, but also guys like Jordan Addison who really take this team to the next level. So big fan of the talent that's coming out. I've got a couple guys circled, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm really, always happy to watch Pitt tape because I know these guys are well coached. I know they're well developed, and it's going to keep happening like that.
Well, don't worry about it. I'll have you on here this summer. We'll talk those 2023 guys in depth. For now, 2022 though. But Ian, as always, great stuff, man. Tell them where they can find your stuff, follow you, do all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Ian_Cummings_9 on Twitter. PFN is at PFN365. That's where we got all the draft stuff coming out. As we head into the draft, we got scouting reports we're updating. I got ones on Pickett, Mathis as well, so check those out. But then also just scouting reports on other players. If you want to study up on the rest of the class, do that. We got mock drafts, we got podcasts, we got Twitter Spaces. It's a busy time, but we're producing content, so feel free to check it out. And especially next year when 2023 rolls in, a lot more Pitt prospect talk to get into. So excited for that when it comes. But for the meantime, 22 NFL Draft. Please check us out. We appreciate it.
Make sure to check them out, folks. As always, thank you for listening to the Locked On Pitt podcast. And as always, hail to Pitt.